Welcome to Corporate Warrior, the podcast that brings you the best advice on how to improve your health, optimize performance, and maximize productivity. With your host, Lawrence Neal.
This podcast is brought to you by HitUni.com. HitUni.com are a provider of amazing online courses for high-intensity training qualifications. HitUni comes highly recommended by the best in the field, including Body by Science co-author Dr. Doug McGuff, Discover Strength CEO Luke Carlson, and trainer and founder of Bay.com, Drew Bay. It was founded by my friend, author, and longtime personal trainer Simon Shawcross, who's also been a guest on the podcast. Simon has 15 years experience training clients and has supervised over 15,000 high-intensity training workouts. Using knowledge from experts like Skylar Tanner, Dr. James Steele, Dr. Ellington Darden, HitUni is a goldmine for learning everything to do with high-intensity training. The courses are delivered online through the website, where you can learn via a variety of multimedia materials at your own pace. There's online support and a discussion forum where you can share ideas and ask for help. To learn more about high-intensity training and improve my own results, I started their personal trainer course. The content is amazing, the courses are really easy to follow, and each section is organized into bite-sized chunks that give you a real sense of achievement after you complete each one. I should also mention there is a DIY course. So this is the course for you if you're not necessarily a personal trainer, but you want to learn more about high-intensity training and how to implement it for maximum benefit in your own exercise regime. To get your exclusive Corporate Warrior 10% discount on any course you purchase, simply head on over to hituni.com, that's HITUNI.com, and enter the coupon code CW10, that's CW and the number 10. So again, head on over to hituni.com, pick your course, and enter the coupon code CW10 for 10% discount. Thank you for your support. Hi guys, I am Lawrence Neal and welcome to another episode of Corporate Warrior, the podcast where it is my job to understand how to optimize productivity and health, career, business and lifestyle by interviewing the most effective people around today. So my guests include everyone from zero carb world record holders to medical physicians to high intensity training specialists, and from startup founders to highly successful business owners and New York Times best-selling authors. My next guest is Esther Gokhale. Esther is the creator and founder of the Gokhale Method, an ecosystem of posture education, products and community to help people recover a pain-free life. After experiencing crippling back pain during her first pregnancy and unsuccessful back surgery, Esther began her lifelong crusade to vanquish back pain. Her studies at the Aplomb Institute in Paris and years of research in non-industrial cultures led her to develop the Gokhale Method. Her method has been featured in many publications, including the New York Times, where she was given the title The Posture Guru of Silicon Valley, and more recently NPR. On Corporate Warrior, as some of you know, we often discuss the subject of strength and muscle hypertrophy a lot, so it was nice to take a little detour into the subject of optimizing posture and movement. In this episode, Esther and I discuss her view on effective walking styles and the potential problems of heel striking. We talk about the ideal shoes for walking. Are high heels bad for you? What are barefoot shoes ideal? We talk about back pain and posture and the application of strength training. We talk about sleep positions and much, much more than that. So for all the show notes and links for this episode and all episodes, please go to corporatewarrior.co. And at the end, please don't forget to hang around for your free gift. And now I present to you Esther Gokhale. Esther Gokhale. I've pronounced that correctly, haven't I? Yes. Welcome to Corporate Warrior. And thank you for taking the time to come onto the show. As I was sort of saying before we started recording properly, got a bunch of questions I want to ask you about walking and back pain and posture and neck and all sorts of things. I think a lot of people know who you are and your background and things like that already, but just for those that don't, could you just kind of summarize, I guess, your expertise before we get started?
So my background is multicultural, first of all, half Indian, half Dutch. So all my life I've been navigating different cultures and I'm trying to absorb the best from all. And then my formal education was at Harvard and Princeton, biochemistry, so strong science background. And that continues to play out in my logical bent to the offerings I create. I'm married to a Stanford professor, and I've taken advantage of that in taking a lot of classes at Stanford in anthropology, also at the medical school. So actually dissecting corpses and the works. So I've
Lovely.
sort of immersed myself. It was, and in learning all along the way, and then I've had many years of experience as an acupuncturist, and have been, then once I ran into trouble with my back and went on to discover a solution, have had a natural lab in my patients to try techniques out and what order of things work best. And then over time that's evolved into a method. And we now have over 60 teachers around the world who offer basic courses and consultations to help people regain what we call primal posture.
Excellent. Very interesting. I wanted to kick off talking about walking. Walking is something I'm very interested in. I mean, a lot of people think, and you've often, when you talk about walking and teach proper walking form, you often start by saying, or you have in some of the presentations I've seen, start by saying, why are we talking about this? This should be something that we all just do, right? So could you describe kind of like how people, like what issues you see when you see people walking like incorrectly or in a disadvantageous way, and how we actually should be walking?
So there are some common problems that include landing very heavily with every step, and people sort of take that to be a part of their personality. I have a heavy gait, and they quickly learn in our courses that it has very little to do with their personality, and that it has everything to do with inadequate, unsustained glute contractions, and that any hunter-gatherer would know how to land very gently, and it's the only way you survive in that ecosystem. So we know from just common sense that our hunter-gatherer ancestors had to be landing very softly and in a very controlled fashion. And that happens to have other benefits like sparing the joints, wear and tear, calcium deposits in the form of osteoarthritis and what have you. So that's a common mistake, landing heavily. Related to underusing the glutes. And underusing the glutes happens because that's not the way we're patterned, but also because we have a systematic tendency to tuck the pelvis. And once you tuck your pelvis, your glutes are somewhat disadvantaged in working. So they don't naturally work. And tuck the pelvis happens because of, I think, childhood furniture, car seats, umbrella strollers, the fashion industry. So people are taught to tuck. And once you tuck, glutes don't work and all kinds of things go wrong. And there's much more, there's the orientation of the legs that tends to be problematic. And anytime you're putting mileage on your system, then any misalignment is going to weigh against you. It'll have benefits, but it'll also have wear and tear in parallel. And the wear and tear is unnecessary and can be schooled out of people.
So I saw you demonstrating how people should be contracting their glutes when they walk, and I saw you on stage doing this and demonstrating it, and that was very interesting to me. And you showed the picture of the two, I think, tribesmen who had very attractive bottoms. And and I wondered, like, okay, that's great. Like, yes, okay, we can contract the glutes, and that can perhaps improve our walking form. But how do you sustain that and make that a default? Because
a habit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
A habit.
I mean, human beings learn by repetition. So in our courses, we use multiple ways of cueing people. So we use pictures like the pictures of the buttocks of those Ubong tribesmen. Everybody who sees that, oh, we want to be like that. There is that impulse. So there's an aesthetic cue, but there's also a visual cue. And then we explain how it all works, how it makes sense for those muscles to be part of the cascade of events that happens in every step. Okay, so we break it down for people, we explain, and then perhaps most importantly of all, we help cue people with our hands. So we actually guide, we press into the spot that needs to work, the place of maximum tonus, so they know where they need to push back, and we time it correctly. It's quite the training, when we do. I just came back from Continuing Ed weekend for our teachers in Europe and on the East Coast. Next month, it'll be on the West Coast. And, this is part of their training, how to arrive at the spot at the correct time, stay for the correct amount of time, press in the correct direction to optimize the cue to the student. So this is all part of how we get them to learn it and learn it in multiple ways so that they have a much better chance of hanging on to it,
Okay.
And it is a natural thing. So it's not like we're trying to teach people to do something contrived. So even if it is unfamiliar, it feels strange, it also feels strangely familiar. They used to do this when they were little. And it's built into the genes. So it goes more smoothly than one would imagine.
So what you're alluding to are your courses that people can go on, right? That and your team will basically guide them through this process to kind of correct people's walking form.
Correct.
How long does that take normally with most people to get them? Like, what have you noticed?
So this is something we're extremely proud of, is how efficient we are at transforming people's gait and ways of standing, sitting, sleeping, bending. It goes together, because if I was to isolate walking, that would be a little harder. I could do it. It's not a bad place, but it would be harder going compared with if they've already learned to have their behind in stack sitting, for example, or in standing. We call it tall standing. If they've already learned to sort of ease the rectus and allow the pelvis to settle in its natural position, now they're better prepped for learning to walk, for helping squeeze the glutes and straighten out the back leg and all these other features that are part of natural walking. So 6 lessons is what we do to teach the whole package of sitting, standing, bending, lying down, lifting, and walking is sort of the crowning glory, actually. We also teach an approach to exercise, and we expect people to then take it into their lives and be active with these principles.
One thing someone's told me before, having observed me walk, is I apparently have quite a hard heel strike. And I've not really thought about it. I've just, I just walk, and, I'm a fairly active individual. I do a fair amount of strength training and exercise, and I'd like to think that my walking form would be good because of that. Is there any issues with heel striking or?
Yeah, there are. Yeah, okay. The heel can develop arthritic changes. People have heel spurs, and where do those heel spurs come from? But stress on the heel. And where would stress on the heel come from? It would be the heel strike, because just standing on the heel is normal. It's normal for human beings to have most of their weight lined up over their heels. But it is not normal to land heavily on your heel. And that will induce, wherever there's stress is where calcium deposits. So the problem with heavy heel strike is heel spurs. You're inviting calcium deposition and heel spurs, and then if you're unlucky, that can manifest itself in pain and problems.
So is it? Should I be landing on the front of my foot?
No,
Ideally, no.
not in walking. In running, you want a midfoot landing, but in walking on a friendly surface, it's normal to land on your heels ever so slightly before you land on the rest of your foot. Okay. It's not that you lift up the front of your foot, flex your foot, and land very distinctly on the heels. No, but if it's a friendly surface, your foot would be relaxed and your heel would land ever so slightly before the rest of it. If it was an unfriendly surface, if it was thorny or pebbly or very hard like concrete, then you would do the additional work, and it is additional work, of slightly pointing your foot and landing on the midfoot, because then you have additional cushioning and buffering for landing. Yeah. But so that's what I've observed. So for example, I mean, this comes from observation of people in cultures where they've lived by their bodies and the bodies seem to perform very well. So in Portugal, it's on the beach, walking with this guide, and he was very distinctly landing on his heels first. And then we came to this archaeological site that he was going to guide us through. And he immediately switched to a midfoot landing, because it was very hard cement. So I saw that transition.
Was and that I've intuitive? Seen that. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, these people are not thinking it through. It's they just move as they move, but first of all, they have their architecture in a sound place, and they've mimicked people around them who have sound body mechanics. So they have a lot of things that they can work with, and it's all habit, and that would be nice, but that's not the case in our culture. Our culture is sort of departed from healthy ways quite a bit. And so now it does take some study, which takes me back to your earlier question, like, you are pretty fit and you've been using your muscles, you do strength training. How come it isn't just coming naturally? Like, why are you heel striking hard? And I think, people have little distortions from the way they were carried as infants, from the furniture they've used as children and into adulthood, little tucks, little sways. Their parents told them, sit up straight, stand up straight, and they arched their back, and that became habit. And so between all these little shifts that are part of our modern culture, the muscles are not working normally, you could say. So there are little shifts that show up in gait and in bending and in all things we do. And it takes a little education to get it honed, to get it all working for you instead of against you.
You just made me think of something. And I'm not sure if this is outside of your realm of expertise or not. Muscle imbalances. So yeah. I have my trapezius muscle are actually quite significantly different in size.
I can see that.
Oh, you can? All right, okay.
Yeah, we're on Skype and I can see your left one is quite a lot higher. And yeah.
That's right. So I remember going up to a personal trainer, knowledgeable personal trainer, because a lot of PTs aren't that knowledgeable, and asking about this and sort of asking, well, is that genetic? Is that the result of me, as a child carrying my bag too much on one shoulder? Because I've done a lot of, upper body overhead pressing and strength training, which I thought would eventually even those muscles out, but that's not what's happened. So do you know why that is? Is there any way, do you know what's caused that? And do you know any way that one can reverse it or correct it at all? Or is that just
really interesting timing? Because, I'm in the process of writing a book on raising babies and another one on raising children to have good posture. And there is data showing that it begins in the womb. Wow. It's like hip dysplasia, for example, because of the way babies are arranged, tends to be much more frequent on the left than the right. Go figure. It's because of the way babies are most commonly positioned in the womb that it already shows up. And I conjecture that your pelvic position when you're pregnant is going to define some features of the baby's architecture. And even more importantly is how you're carried as a baby. Like, are your legs externally rotated? And because all babies have immature hip sockets. And so are they being positioned well so that their hip sockets can ossify in a healthy way? Or are they being placed in umbrella strollers and other horrible furniture so that that entire hip socket is misaligned? And there's turns out to be a correlation with hip replacements in adulthood. Crazy. But, like in Nigeria and African places where babies are carried on their mother's back, it's extremely rare to have hip dysplasia, and it's also rare for the adults to have hip arthritis. And so there's this correlation. So it starts early in the womb, how you're carried as a baby. So all these things, and I'm researching scoliosis right now, and that turns out also to have these early correlations and cultural correlations. Different cultures have different rates, and it can be assigned to certain practices. So all that being the case, I always tell my students, it's never too late to move in a healthy direction. Like even if people have asymmetries, if you have scoliosis, all the more reason to do the very simple practices we teach of stretch sitting and stretch lying. And it's good enough to do it symmetrically because that will symmetrize the body. And then if you learn a little more sophisticated version, then you can work on one side a little more than the other side in certain regions of the spine, and moving on up, you can switch it out. So you're sort of working towards symmetry. And I've seen tremendous results with that. And then whatever is genetically encoded, sometimes some asymmetries are genetically encoded, and you can't do much about that. But I don't find that those very often give rise to a lot of problems. I think if you take care of the front and back stuff, and you take care of all the acquired stuff, you'll be in good shape.
Yeah, that's correct. Like I've had no physical issue or problem or pain. It's just an aesthetic thing, I suppose. But interesting.
Yeah. Well, people are often a little asymmetric, and I think it gets blamed for more than is valid, because any pair of human eyes can see asymmetry. You don't have to be educated at all. We're built to recognize asymmetry. But we don't know too much about front and back distortions. So if we have a problem and we see the asymmetry, it's very easy to sort of just assign a causal connection there, and keep working on this asymmetry. Okay, now we need to adjust, and we need to do this, we need to do that. Okay, it's come out a little better, it's a little worse this week, whatever, and without really knowing that there's a causal connection. And in my experience, of course, sometimes that's exactly the problem, in extreme cases and so on. But often that's not the issue. That's not the most pertinent issue.
Just going back to walking for a sec, really interested to talk about footwear. What shoes do you think are most ideal for people to be walking in day to day?
It depends very much on the condition of their feet and how much they know about how to use their feet and their body and the surface. So it's a complex answer. So at the extreme, you would have a hunter-gatherer with really muscular, well-architectured feet who knows how to walk and use their feet in every step that they take. And it doesn't matter what you put them on, could even be cement, they'd be best off probably barefoot. In any case, not badly off barefoot on any surface. At the other extreme, take someone who's got plantar fasciitis, they've got bunions, they've got inflamed joints, they don't have much muscular development in their feet. They are stacking their weight on the front of their feet, all the little tiny joints there. They don't know how to grip with their feet when they walk. And they'd be much better off, I think, with some structure in the shoe and some insole to prevent their feet from distorting further than they have already. But most importantly, some training on how to start building their feet, using that insole not passively as a crutch, but actively as a training device to actually grip and grab, and stacking their bones better and so on. And then slowly building, like earning their way to being less shod. You know, that's how I see it. So once people have taken our course, they are advised to spend some amount of time barefoot because they know what to do with their feet. They know how to stack their bones. And as long as it's a somewhat friendly surface, not beginning with cement, then they would do well to be barefoot and further develop their feet and spiral upwards.
Because I used to wear, I guess, conventional trainers or sneakers, depending on where you are. And I kind of got reeled into the whole barefoot movement. And I invested in barefoot trainers years ago. And I've been wearing either barefoot or, the Vivo Barefoot brand?
Sure.
So those types of trainers or zero drop, just Vans, that have they're just flat. And I found at first it was kind of strange, but then over time, now it's just normal. And now if I put on a shoe, let's say a professional shoe with a suit, like a black shoe with a heel, so uncomfortable. Like I'll wear it. I'll wear it if I have to.
I'm sorry to hear that it's uncomfortable because ideally you would like to be comfortable in everything, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But I wonder if it's because I'm wearing what I feel, or certainly is my experience, more comfortable, more ideal footwear most of the time. So when I depart from that, I'm going to have a less comfortable experience in a shoe that has a huge heel,
if you go back in history, Louis I forget, 13th, 14th, whatever, they were wearing heels. They had to wear heels to avoid all the shit on the streets, right? Because everyone was just putting all their sewer on the streets. It was a health device to wear heels. And ideally, in my mind, you would be comfortable in no matter what shoes you're wearing. And I actually teach that for people who have some shortness in the calf muscles, adding a little heel enables you to still have good form. Because if you don't have a heel and you have a short calf, you're going to be slightly tucking and it throws everything up the chain out of whack. So, I do think it's important to work towards being able to be barefoot and to be able to use minimal footwear. That would be very nice and ideal. But to have to insist on that as the only way to be comfortable, in our cultural context, doesn't work very, you would like to be more broad than that. And I think one can be if one understands it. The important thing is how you're using your foot. It's like where your weight distributes, how you're using your foot muscles. And putting people in barefoot shoes just sort of without any education is a lot like throwing someone into the deep end of the pool. Maybe they'll swim, but not everybody does. Some people actually sink, and you hear much publicized cases of people who develop fractures in their feet from running around on bare minimal foot, and there's been some lawsuits. And so I think the best is to study, understand the principles, and then you'd be fine with anything, including and ideally including barefoot. But if you've had a checkered past, if you've had, injuries and problems, then an insole can actually be helpful. Because it can be something that allows you to train your foot. You can pretend it's a clump of dirt and you are grabbing it. You don't just sit there passively, but you use it to your advantage. And then shorten your foot, make your foot more muscular, make it stronger, more resilient, so that you have a built-in insole in the end.
Right, okay. And you mentioned that there can be some chronic issues wearing high heels, which obviously the ladies like to wear high heels, and some of those like to wear them very regularly. I know that if you wear them occasionally, there's probably not, I think you've talked about this before, there's not huge problems, but what about if you're wearing them like every day, like all day?
So I don't know how these people manage it, because I have to say 1 minute in really high heels, the stilettos, I can't figure it out, And I also think that those are just plain not healthy, because you're throwing your weight to the front of your foot, creating bunions, creating hammered toes, and often they point, so there's not enough room in the toe box. Yeah, so I think everybody is in agreement that a very high heel is problematic. It throws your weight forward. It exacerbates any problems you've had with hammer toes or bunions. And I think you're just better off without a very high heel. There I don't think, I don't have the same philosophy of, you should be able to be comfortable in anything. No, I mean, there are crazy enough things that you don't really want to be comfortable in. Yeah. High heels is one of those, I think. A moderate heel, 1 inch, 2 inches even, can be a compensatory, healthy device to help you get around short calf muscles.
So when you were talking about kind of the different categories in posture, so you talk about walking and standing and everything else, you mentioned sleeping, and this is interesting to me. So what kind of principles do you teach in terms of correct sleeping posture?
Well, I think the most important feature for modern people in sleeping posture is having good length. Because if you have really good length, then your discs are not compressed at the get-go, and you can navigate all kinds of sleeping surfaces much better. So if it's a soft bed and there's a little bit of a canoe effect, it's not a big deal. The discs have enough room that even though the shape of them is going to be now distorted, they're not pushed over the edge, sending alarm signals to the brain to do something, which would be toss and turn or tighten up some muscle to try to protect the area. And then people have restless sleep, or they're waking up kind of stiff and sore. So length is the most important thing. It also comes up in a very stiff surface, like if you're camping and you have a very flat surface, you want, like a woman with the womanly figure, narrow waist, wider hips. The spine might actually take a dip in the middle, and you don't want that to push you over the edge again. You want it to be easily accommodated, so good length is critical. The second thing is good shape in the spine, and I describe a J spine, and that takes a little bit of coaching to learn well. You want to have your behind, but you don't want to have it stuck back. You want to have your lumbar area lengthened and not too curvy-wurvy. And you don't want that. That takes a little bit of doing, because most people have studied sit up straight, stand up straight, thrust out your chest, and arch your back. And to coax people out of that, to coach people out of that, it's a process. We take our 6 lessons have a lot of repetition on this front, first in a controlled, like seated posture, and then standing, and then while you're walking, and you want to maintain this new architecture. So, and then you can study it while sleeping, but you can also enjoy the fruits of all of that rework and remodeling while you're sleeping.
Do you advocate like if people sleep on their side or they sleep on their front or anything like that?
So when we first teach people, we start on the back, because has the easiest and fewest number of principles to learn. And then we teach them on the side, because that doubles up as both a comfortable, good, healthy sleeping option, but also trains their brain to have a J spine, to connect with a J-shaped spine instead of an S-shaped spine. And then we after the initial course, we teach people how to sleep the way many populations in the world sleep, which is slightly with the body kind of twisted, one knee bent, the other leg straight. So that works well for very stiff surfaces like you would have in village India or village Africa. Sleeping on the belly is also possible, but tends to show up people's tendencies to sway and to tuck and to turn their heads in an unhealthy fashion because they don't have 90-degree easy turn at their neck. So it takes more implements, but we teach that too later.
Is there any issue? So if you're laying on your front and you lay on your front, but you obviously have your head on its side on the pillow so you can breathe. My understanding is that because that kind of twists the spine, that can be a bad position to sleep in. Is that correct?
Well, if you have a baby, they very easily turn their head 90 degrees. There's no twisting in the spine whatsoever, right? But if you have someone who has a typically stiff neck and can't turn 90 degrees easily, then it's going to start twisting the spine, and that's a problem. So what I propose as a solution for that is to sleep off of the edge of the pillow. Don't put the entire head on the pillow, but just ask only a 45-degree turn or a 60-degree turn or whatever can be done easily as a solution for that problem. And similarly, there are solutions for all the other parts of the body that tend to distort sleeping on the front, like the shoulders tend to slump and the back tends to arch and what have you. So there are little tweaks, and it's best to learn these, just, be coached in them. Like once you're put in a really comfortable position, it's pretty seductive. And then you have a memory of it. And then you can find it, and you will find it again with the kind of coaching we do.
Cool. So moving on to kind of like back pain and I guess more posture related questions. One of my guests who's been on the podcast and also a listener, his name's Dr. James Steele. He's a assistant professor at Southampton University in the UK. And he's got his expertise is chronic lower back pain. So he's fairly well versed in this subject. And he was curious. He said you offer justification for your approaches often based on evolutionary reasoning and postures seen in traditional populations and cultures. And he asks, how do you reconcile this with the fact that there is, from his perspective, little evidence to suggest that these cultures have lower rates of lower back pain? And he has a study on that. I just wondered how you reconcile that. Have you thought about that?
So it's actually become true in recent times that these cultures sometimes have worse back pain rates because these cultures get hit extremely hard. Like they're dealing with malnutrition, their forests have been taken down, they barely survive, And so, and sometimes like I was just earlier this year in Orissa, and they have 62 tribal populations there. Oh, wow. But for example, they're no longer allowed to bear firearms, which means they can't hunt, and their forests have been taken down anyway. So their protein sources are minimal. Okay. Right. What I saw those people eat was rice and veggies and not even lentils very much. And they've got some good government handouts and so on. And they also get pulled into labor situations which are beyond what any tradition would have them do. So, for example, in certain African countries, in transition. So these people are in cement factories and they're carrying like 200 kilos on their head. Now, no one in a traditional culture would ever carry that much. But they're forced, and there have even been instances of deaths from that. And so you're getting people in really, really stretched circumstances. And it's not surprising that they don't have days off. They don't have workman's comp. They don't have Advil. They don't have, any kind of coping mechanism when they're pushed to those extremes. So I think it goes from, in my observation, goes from being extremely functional, and that is well established in the medical literature, to being beyond dysfunctional, like they get broken. So if, I have in the back of my book a long bibliography, and there's lots of evidence, not as much as I'd like, because, who's going to pay for those studies? Pharma's not sponsoring studies on low incidence of back pain in some village somewhere, right?
Yeah.
So, but there are some studies, and I think it's pretty clear that there's studies that if you go back in time, there's a lower incidence of back pain. And it's becoming harder and harder to find populations that have healthy musculoskeletal situations or any kind of healthy situation. But if you look at some of the older studies, it's pretty clear that there was a time, and I still find people who have admirable ways and low incidences of back pain.
Interesting. Okay. So I guess a large number of the people that listen to this podcast are advocates of resistance training. So they large number of them participate in things like different types of strength training, like deadlifts, and they might use a Med-X lower back machine, or other types of exercise that focus on strengthening the lumbar extension muscles and kind of the muscles that make up the back. And just wondered, what your thoughts are, if someone is practicing things like deadlifts or back extensions or exercises like that, are they going to fix a lot of the issues that you see in the population from a posture point of view and a lower back pain point of view?
So, I don't think the back extensors are the most important muscle to strengthen unless you're doing a lot of lifting, like for your average desk worker, that's not the most important muscle to strengthen. I think this person would be even better off focusing on the deeper back muscles, the rotatorus and multifidus, and the deeper 3 layers of abdominal muscles to form a kind of brace, to form I call it the inner corset, so that you can be slender and tall and be resistant to all kinds of damage. But that said, deadlifts and the whole body kind of exercises that hunter-gatherers would have done are very useful in to just rather than just one little machine, like just doing your biceps. I like whole body exercise because they're more efficient, and to the extent that they mimic what a hunter-gatherer would have done, I think they're very sound, like lifting, deadlift. This is the way people in indigenous societies lift loads. They don't bend their knees and pick things up. They hinge at the hips, and they bend their knees a little bit to accommodate any tightness in the hamstring. And so this is the way they do it. But that's a very, very nuanced technique, actually, how they do it, like where their legs are, the organization of the leg, where the pelvis is. And, there are straight backs and there are straight backs. And you want to make sure you have a hunter-gatherer type of straight back, rather than a slightly rounded, seems to be straight back.
So one of the questions that our listener submitted was regarding kyphosis. When I was a teenager, I played a lot of computer games, and I often would sit at a computer with very poor posture, kind of rounded shoulders, hunched over. And I would say, I haven't sort of scrutinized my posture a lot recently, but I probably have very mild kyphosis in kind of my mid upper back. What's the best way, in your opinion, to reverse that type of condition?
So the most important thing is to address the root cause of it, which is usually the position of the pelvis. So you've given me a couple of hints about your own situation. You've told me you land heavily on your heels, and you've told me you have some kyphosis in the upper back. And so I have a list of suspects here. Like, I'm thinking you may tuck slightly, by my standards, slightly tuck your pelvis. In fact, now that I look at your Skype picture and you got a basketball there, I think I see a small amount of tucking at the pelvis, but I can't be sure. But once you do that, then you've the physics of the building block stack is such that the upper body is going to slightly round forward. And it takes an inordinate amount of discipline and tension to keep upright, and it's not even healthy to do so. The real fix is to reposition the base, to have your imaginary tail out behind just the right amount, not stuck behind, not tightening up the back muscles to do so, but usually with some kind of support, a kind of wedge to help it position well in a relaxed way so the rest of you can stack. But that gets to the root of the problem, and there's no navigating around that. But once you've developed some degree of kyphosis, then you need to also work locally. So the shoulder position, and I teach a shoulder roll that I think that's the simplest, easiest thing we teach, and it will help not exacerbate a kyphosis in the thoracic area. So, by rolling the shoulders forward, up, back, very gently, very simply, you take away the forward pull on the shoulder blades, making that portion of the thoracic spine sort of rounded side to side. And then gliding the head back to be in as good a place as possible is also very helpful, because the head is heavy, and if it's cantilevered out there in front of you, then of course you're going to be increasing the kyphosis in your thoracic spine. So those things are important. And then there is roller work that, if it's done well, and I don't mean arching back over a roller or distorting the spine while you're working it, but if you can learn to do, and we have on our website, we have techniques for how you use a roller, and you want a roller that has a really hard core, but a soft exterior, preferably a sticky exterior, so it doesn't slide away. And then you can actually work paravertebrae by paravertebrae, and mobilize any area that's gotten a bit stiff or rigid over time. So those are my top techniques for addressing kyphosis in the upper back.
Great. And I know the exercises you're talking about, the one with the shoulder, where you ratchet it back, and what you're mentioning about the sitting with your tail as if your tail's sticking out. I'll link to the videos and your TEDx talk about that, so people can see the visuals.
Awesome.
Yeah. So another question I had submitted was, how do you correct posture to stop neck pain? I'm not sure if you've got enough information to answer that, but a friend of mine suffering from some sort of neck pain. So what are the common culprits of that, and how do you tend to resolve neck pain?
So, I could go on about this subject, but no, I think I'm just going to give you a very brief answer, because especially with the neck, it's a very delicate structure, and every little millimeter makes a difference. So you want to find the right position for your head, front to back, also rotate it up, chin up to chin down, and lengthened. And once again, the position of the pelvis is critical for what's going to happen higher up in the chain. So having an anteverted pelvis, and that's a tricky, very detailed thing to learn, like, where does my pelvis really belong? And, you might look at yourself, pictures from when you were a baby or a little toddler, and get a hint there, or look at pictures of your ancestors and get a hint there, or look at your counterparts in cultures where they look beautiful, like, and look for people who don't have pain, which, as I said, is harder and harder to find.
Appreciate that time is ticking, Esther. So I'm going to only ask you two more questions. In terms of, I'd be very curious, I'm sure the listeners are, in terms of your own sort of personal exercise habits. I've heard you talk about that you practice yoga, but what does your current exercise regime look like for you at the moment?
So my favorite two activities are yoga for calming and just making me feel very peaceful and tingly and well circulating. And then the other one is dance. That's my other favorite. And that's for energizing. So I like the whole Latin, African diaspora, so it's a lot of work around the shoulder girdle and around the hip girdle, because I find not many sports or activities really explore all the motions that are possible around the hip. They tend to be just front and back. And it's very much to our advantage to get the juices flowing in that area, for fertility, for organ function, for elimination, for what have you, to get the pelvis in the right place for the rest of the body. Very nice to have, the hip movements that, say, samba has or Congolese dance has. So those are my two favorites, but I do a variety of things. So I have a ping pong table that's just most of the time put up in our living room. Brian and I met playing ping pong, and we take breaks, and it's a way for us to hang out and check in throughout the day, since both of us often work at home. And so ping pong is a big favorite. And I like walking, I like running, I like swimming. I go swimming sometimes, go to the gym sometimes. I mean to go more. I'm busy and I get a little distracted sometimes from physicality. Mm-hmm. My current role is unfortunately a lot behind the computer. I garden as well. So I have a lot of variety in my physical endeavors. And I just in the last couple of years have gotten less active than I used to be, and then I like being, and then I think is ideal. So that's in the process of changing once again.
Very cool. And what's the best way for people to contact you or find out more about you these days?
So, just looking up my name, Esther Posture, will lead them to all kinds of past articles like the New York Times article and so on, but also my website, which is a good place to go, gokhalemethod.com. And that's GOKHALE method.com. And that's where all of our teachers around the world are listed. So you can just type in your zip code and you will find which teachers are near you and can provide you the hands-on guidance that I think is best. And my book is available on Amazon and wherever books are sold. So it's called 8 Steps to a Pain-Free Back. We have lots of free online workshops that we do. So ours is a good list to be on. We send a newsletter every 2 weeks with tips about posture and invitations to our free online courses. So that's how I recommend reaching out, being in touch with us. And that way, if there's something coming to your area, then you will know.
Cool. So for all of the listeners, to find the show notes and resources and links that Esther's mentioned, that I've mentioned on this episode, please go to 15minutescorporatewarrior.com/podcast. That's 1515. There'll also be a list of the rest of the podcast episodes there as well. So until next time, thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed that. Before you head off, head on over to corpwarrior.com to get your free ebook with 6 interview transcripts with some of my top guests, including Dr. Doug McGuff, Drew Bay, and Bill Day Simone, on how to optimize muscle gain, fat loss, and overall health in an efficient, effective, and sustainable way. These transcripts are not verbatim, deliberately. Instead, they've been transcribed in an easy read format to make it more enjoyable and easier for you to quickly pick out what you need and start getting results. To get your ebook, head on over to corpwarrior.com, that's CORP warrior.com, and enter your email address. Then check your email for an email from me with a confirmation link. Once you click the link, you will be instantly redirected to a PDF version of the transcripts.